Today, I'm going to share everything you need to know about the new Claude Code Agent Teams feature, including all of the limitations I found and concerns I think you should know when using this new feature. The default Claude Code is obviously incredibly powerful, but ultimately your workflows are sequential, right? You have one agent and one context window to work within. With agent teams, you're running multiple Claude codes in parallel, and unlike subagents, they can communicate with each other. This gives you two huge benefits. So first, you get parallelization, where you have multiple agents working simultaneously, and that's just going to let you accomplish things much faster. Second, you have potentially higher quality output because the agent teammates can talk to each other, so they can challenge each other, they can present different views, etc. You do already get parallelization with subagents, so I'll break down how agent teams are different and where they actually make more sense than subagents. But I'll start with how agent teams work, and then we'll walk through a live example. At the end, I'll also share a couple of Claude Code skills that I made to share with you guys completely free so that you can visualize the conversation that's happening between the agent teammates and understand how they're actually working together. It's been super useful for me to learn how to use agent teams more effectively and also have Claude Code optimize the way it uses agent teams. All right, so how does this actually work? With agent teams, you have one team lead, this guy up here, and it is Claude Code's birthday, so it's got its birthday hat on. And this team lead is going to manage one or more other teammates. And these are, again, full Claude Code instances themselves, which is different from subagents. The lead is going to be responsible for creating the team, spawning these teammates, generating the task list that it's going to then assign to the different teammates, and then synthesizing all of the outputs at the end. Each teammate gets its own context window and works independently on whatever task it's assigned, and most importantly, can communicate back and forth with the team lead and the other teammates as well. The shared task list is just the default task list that comes with regular Claude Code. What's really cool about it is that it has dependencies. So let's say you have two tasks where task 2 depends on task 1. Once agent 1 finishes task 1, task 2 will become unblocked. And then agent 1 can just immediately start working on task 2. And that can be really useful because it already did the implementation for task 1, so it understands the changes that it made. And that might be super relevant context going into task 2. So there's potentially some efficiency gains there versus having to spin up a completely new agent with little context on task 2. Let's talk a little more about the communication. So there's a shared mailbox that all of the teammates have access to where they're sending and receiving messages. Unlike subagents, these teammates can broadcast messages to the entire team, or they can send DMs to individual teammates. But on top of that, you as the user can also drop in and send a DM to any one of these agents, including the team lead. And so it starts to get really messy really fast. I think it's nice that you have that option to communicate with any of the agents, but I don't think it's actually super useful or practical because, as we'll see, trying to communicate with individual teammates at the speed at which agents work at isn't super useful, I think. But more importantly, we want to be moving towards working with more autonomous agents and not really babysitting. So again, I don't think this is going to be a super useful feature going forward. Let's spend a little more time breaking down the difference between agent teams and subagents. The increased cost for running agent teams is actually pretty insane, so you're probably not going to want to be throwing agent teams at everything. This table shows a comparison between the two from Anthropic's official docs. And I think it really just boils down to the communication piece, right? I've described subagents as being more like tools, where Claude Code gives the subagent an input, and then after some time, it gets an output, just like any normal tool. You, me, Claude Code, none of us can communicate with the subagent while it's working. So you can't have things like human in the loop. But more importantly, the subagent can't be steered by the main Claude code during its task. So let's say the subagent completes its work and the output is wrong. Claude Code is only going to find out once the subagent completes its work. And at that point, it would have to respawn a new subagent and give it a modified prompt and then wait for that whole process again. So it's definitely less efficient if you can't have those touch points during the process. And this is different with agent teams because they can communicate. Like we said earlier, they can ask each other questions, they can challenge each other, and more importantly, the team lead can steer them as they work. And I think that's going to be especially important if you are using weaker models like Sonnet or Haiku for your teammates. I want to give you an important takeaway here. It might sound obvious, but the team lead is orchestrating the whole team, right? Defining the tasks, prompting the individual teammates, steering the workflow. And so getting the most out of agent teams is really going to come down to how you design and prompt your team lead. So we'll see how this works in practice, and the skills that I'm going to share with you later on are going to help you optimize your agent team prompts. As a general rule of thumb, you want to use subagents when communication between them isn't that important. And then use agent teams when teammates could benefit from sharing findings, challenging each other, and coordinating on something more complex. And the skill I'm going to share with you will also help you determine if a problem is a good fit for agent teams. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is just make sure that your Claude Code is updated to at least 2.1.32. And this is still a research preview feature, so we're actually going to have to force enable it in our settings. Next, in whatever project you're working in, you want to go to your .claude folder, go to your settings.json. You might have a couple, like this local version. Doesn't really matter which one you use, but if you don't have these, then you can just create this file, settings.json, and then you want to enter this exact setting. There's two ways to run your agent team and to view them working. The first is the default mode, which is in process. So if you just start up your Claude after turning on that setting, you can activate an agent team by just telling Claude to use an agent team. The other way to run the agent teams is using tmux, and tmux is going to allow you to have that multi-pane, multi-window view where you're going to be able to see the conversation happening for each agent. I'll link the instructions for installing tmux in the description. And by the way, if you are finding this video useful, I go into a lot more deep dives and workflows in my weekly newsletter, the AI Launchpad. You can join for free. The link is in the description. So there are some simple starter examples in the docs if you want to check those out, but I wanted to walk you through a real life use case. And the way I generated this / command to kick off this workflow is I had Claude Code just review the official docs for the agent teams and then help me generate an effective prompt to leverage agent teams to review my newsletter drafts. Here we have 3 teammates, a voice reviewer that's going to make sure that the voice matches how I normally write, an engagement reviewer just to make sure that it's following a good storyline. And then finally, we have an accuracy reviewer that's going to actually fact check everything that I mentioned in the newsletter and make sure that it's backed up by the official documentation on Claude Code. We're using Sonnet for each of these teammates to keep the costs a bit lower. So just like subagents, you can specify what model you want to use for your teammates. Notice we also, at the very end, tell the team lead to clean up the team once it's done. This is super important because the team can continue to rack up costs even when the teammates are idle, as we'll see in a bit. Back in the terminal, I'm going to start up a new tmux session, and then I'm going to open Claude and kick off this / command. And now it's created the agent team and is starting to assign the different teammates the tasks. There we go. So all of the teammates are working. So we'll let this run to completion, and then we'll look at what the conversation looked like afterwards. AI is a deep subject built on top of some pretty fundamental math and coding concepts, and understanding those concepts goes a long way. The fundamentals are what let you keep up and cut through the hype. And that's something I've been really intentional about. Brilliant, the sponsor of this video, has been making it actually fun. I've been using Brilliant's How AI Works course, and what I love is being able to actually interact with the models, adjusting temperatures, building language models step by step, instead of just reading about how they work. With Brilliant, you learn math, coding, and AI by solving interactive problems, not just watching videos. Their courses are built by teachers from MIT, Harvard, and Stanford, and they're designed for anyone ages 10 to 110. You can learn for free for a full 30 days by going to brilliant.org/kennyliao, scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or clicking the link in the description. And you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription right now. So thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into it. All right, so the team is completely finished now, and they generated a report here in my project. This is the editorial review. Overall verdict is it's a strong draft and does not need a rewrite, just some targeted fixes. The biggest issue is that I mentioned that the cost for running agent teams can be 7 times higher without specifying that Anthropic mentions this specifically for running agent teams in plan mode. So this was flagged by that accuracy agent as being a critical gap. And if we take a look at the second one, we have a 5-sentence paragraph that needs splitting. So this was flagged by the engagement agent. Let's take a quick look at how the conversation went between these agents and how they worked together to actually complete this task. We can look at broadcast messages between all agents or look at specifically DMs. And then you can filter down to individual agents as well. At the very top, we have our initial prompt, which we kicked off with that / command. After the team is created, this is where it starts to create the individual tasks. So here's the first task, which is going to be the voice review. It does the same for engagement and accuracy. Once the tasks are created, it's actually going to start to assign them. So we see these task update tool calls where it's going to move the status to in progress and then give it a specific owner. And now that it's assigned all of the tasks, now it's going to actually spawn the teammates. And what's interesting to me is that it's using the task tool, which, if you're not familiar, this is the same tool Claude Code uses to spin up subagents. I think it's actually using the same implementation as subagents. And you can kind of see that here because it's defining what the subagent type is, but also the fact that agent teammates can't spawn other teammates or spawn subagents themselves. And I'll talk about this as being a big limitation later on. But yeah, it looks like a lot of the subagent architecture is being repurposed here. The accuracy reviewer is the first to finish its review, and then here it sends a DM to the voice reviewer. So DMs will look like this, where you still have the identifier for the agent, and then you're also going to have this little tag with an arrow saying who this DM was sent to. From here, you just get a bunch of DMs kind of going back and forth and them sharing their findings with each other. Honestly, it's a lot to scroll through and you're probably not going to want to read all of this. So I'm going to show you the second skill that's going to be really useful for having Claude analyze all this. But I just want to scroll to the very bottom here to show you how this kind of ends. Only the team lead can mark these tasks as being completed. So it's managing the full life cycle of tasks and also being the quality gate. So that goes back to the importance of designing the team lead prompt well, where you want to make sure that the team lead is aware of all of the requirements and quality checks that it should put in place before accepting a task as being complete. Once it marks the different tasks as being complete, it then DMs each individual agent to tell them, hey, great work, I'm going to shut down the team now. And then what's funny is the individual teammates actually reply and say, okay, shutdown approved, before they actually get shut down. I imagine this is a mechanism to kind of protect against where maybe a teammate actually isn't done with its work and maybe it wants to do something else but didn't mention it yet. And so maybe it can send a message back to say, hey, no, I'm still going to work on this one thing. Don't shut me down yet. But anyway, at the end, you see this team delete tool that gets called by the team lead. So then the team gets cleaned up. And then we get a summary here, and I just told it to save the report to a markdown file. I created an Agent Teams plugin completely free on my marketplace. The link will be in the description. It's on GitHub, and you can install it with your Claude Code. It's going to come with two skills. You have this view team session and analyze team session. So the view team session generates this standalone HTML file, which we just saw here, which is going to allow you to go through that entire conversation. And then you can export this conversation to Markdown to then be used with that second skill. And that's basically going to analyze that Markdown file. So follow the instructions linked in the description and you'll get access to both of these. When you do export this Markdown, it's going to by default get saved to your downloads folder. I recommend moving it from your downloads folder to your project. So in your project, inside of .claude, you will automatically have this new output folder where the session view gets saved. So that's this HTML file here. So you want to move the exported Markdown to this folder as well. So you can see I downloaded my full session conversation, and all that did was just format it nicely for Markdown. But yeah, this is the exact same full conversation, everything respecting those filters that you had. Once you have the Markdown file in here, then you can run that second skill telling it to analyze this exported conversation. And that's going to generate this new report. We get at the very top a suitability verdict. So this is going to tell you whether your problem is even a good fit for Agent Teams on the first place. And this is following the official Claude Code documentation for Agent Teams. So it's going to be looking at the best practices that are recommended by Anthropic for using Agent Teams. For my use case, the verdict is that it is a good fit. And here it's saying that it was a strong use case for Agent Teams. And specifically from the official documentation, they mention research and review as being one of the best use cases. It calls out that the accuracy reviewers 7x plan mode discovery changed the engagement reviewers subject line recommendation. So having them talk to each other actually did change the course of their work. Further down, you'll get a rating for each of these. Was there a lot of context sharing? Was the task sized appropriately? Because in the docs, they do mention there's a sweet spot for having tasks that are not too big, but also not too small, where the overhead of spinning up teammates might not be worth it. Let's look at the top recommendations for how we could improve our initial prompt or team design. Here it's saying that we could have broken the single monolithic review tasks for each teammate into 2 or 3 smaller subtasks with checkpoints. The other recommendation gets at an issue with how the lead requested full reports from each reviewer where they had already shared their findings. So there was a lot of redundant work. The third one was with context sharing where the voice reviewer couldn't find the skill on the first try. I think that's actually my fault. I might have written a reference to an old location. But yeah, you can see how all of this is surfaced by analyzing the full conversation history. What's nice is you're then going to get an improved prompt. So it's going to be the original prompt, but optimized now, incorporating that full analysis and recommendation at the top. So you can use this plugin to both understand how your agent teams work together, how they can be better, and ultimately use it to improve your prompting for agent teams. Now, while I'm really excited for the Agent Teams feature and generally super bullish on multi-agent systems going forward, I do think there's some real trade-offs with this feature and some limitations that are important to understand. The first one's pretty big. It's cost. Anthropic themselves mentions that there's up to a 7x more token usage compared to a normal session. And as we just saw from the review team, that does apply specifically to planning mode. But from my experience, it's still significantly higher than just running a single Claude Code session. Using myself as an example, this is a complete anecdote, but I checked my usage before and after enabling agent teams. And normally I'm totally fine on my max plan. I rarely hit a session limit. But after enabling the Agent Teams feature for testing, I hit my session limit pretty quickly. I took a screenshot where I still had an hour and 13 minutes left for my reset. So again, I don't have exact cost numbers before and after, but I can just tell you from my personal experience that it does burn tokens much, much faster, and that comes with an increased cost. Now, this specific session was with a different team where I was using it to solve linear issues. And for that team, I had Opus running on all of the teammates. So I didn't specify to use Sonnet or a cheaper model. So you can definitely mitigate the costs here by using cheaper models for your teammates and then reserving Opus for your team lead. Generally, Agent Teams is going to burn more tokens than using an equivalent workflow with Subagents because of the additional communication that Agent Teams have. For example, if a teammate broadcasts a message to all agents, let's say it uses 100 tokens, those 100 tokens become input tokens to now your 5 other teammates. So you're basically 5xing what that one message would cost. The other thing that Anthropic mentions in the docs is that you want to make sure you clean up your teams when the work is done because they continue consuming tokens even if they're idle. And that's because they are still sending messages like idle messages or checking on each other, even though they might not be actively working on a task. So in general, agent teams are going to be significantly more costly. That doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't justify the ROI for specific applications. I think it's just something that you have to be intentional about and really think about when it makes sense to use agent teams versus subagents or a different type of workflow. Another limitation is that agent teammates can't invoke or spawn subagents. And again, that was true with subagents where subagents couldn't spawn other subagents. But I kind of anticipated that full Claude Code teammates would be able to spawn subagents, but unfortunately they can't. This is a pretty significant limitation in my book, since I really had the expectation that these were full Claude Code instances that would be able to do everything that a main Claude Code can. For me specifically, I have a lot of workflows where I utilize subagents for specialized tasks and more importantly to preserve the context window of the main Claude Code. And when I actually tried to use some of those existing workflows with agent teams, the teammates attempt to do the work themselves without actually calling the subagents because they don't have the tools to do it. But they don't have the context that's in the subagent prompt. And so they end up trying to do a task that they don't have context for. It doesn't fail loudly or raise an error. It will just attempt to do the job, but then give a incorrect output or just do a bad job. To be fair, this is an experimental feature right now, and I don't know if things will change in the future, but right now, if your workflows do depend on subagents, just know that they won't carry over cleanly to agent teams and you'll have to redesign them. Finally, the last thing to know is that because your main Claude Code session becomes the team lead, only the team lead has the full context of your conversation. So if you've been having some discussion or planning with Claude before it spawns the agent team, only the team lead is going to have that context. The teammates are spun up with an empty context window and just the prompt that's given to them by the team lead. So again, that goes back to ensuring that you have a really well-designed prompt for your team lead. All right, so wrapping up, I think agent teams is absolutely worth experimenting with for the right use cases. The sweet spot is going to be where agents sharing context and challenging each other produces a better result. So things like code review, research, and competing perspectives, multi-service development where agents own different pieces. And I also think it's a great time to start learning this feature now since it's only going to get better, and working with teams of agents instead of a single agent is definitely the direction of the future. After watching this video, I hope you're walking away with a much better understanding of this new agent teams feature and the tools to start using it for your workflows. Make sure to sign up for my newsletter on Substack, where I'm sharing a lot more content like this. The link is in the description. And if you want to see how I use Claude Code to autonomously resolve linear issues end to end and ship faster, And I've got a video on that, which will also be linked on the screen, and that'll walk you through the whole thing. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next one.